Artfight season is approaching, so you know what that means. Time to update those ref sheets. And while I'm at it, might as well yap about my character's updated lore, right? Hi there, I'm Cavitato, the Caffeinated Potato, and I love character design so much. It's my favorite thing, both in regards to creating my own characters and in seeing what other people can come up with, which is why I love Artfight so much. For those who don't know, Artfight is an annual event that takes place over all of July, where two teams attack each other by drawing other people's characters. That is the very oversimplified version, at least. If you want a more in-depth overview, you could find plenty of videos on the subject. When you have so many personal creative projects, it can be really hard to justify spending time drawing anything outside of that. But with Artfight, it's easier to mentally justify it, at least to me. So I get to have fun drawing other people's characters and expand my skills by doing something new without feeling like I'm just procrastinating doing those bigger projects. Now, you don't need full proper ref sheets to participate in Artfight, just some art of your character. But I've been making a lot of changes and alterations to my character's designs recently, so I thought it would be good to have some good up-to-date ref sheets. This is actually the second time I've made a video like this. You don't have to watch that first video to understand this one. All the important details will be covered here. But if you're curious to see how these characters have evolved over these past 5 months, you can go check that out. Now, without further ado, let the info dumping begin. Starting with the most main character-y of the main characters, Oriana Goldmantle. Born into a noble family with a proud history, Oriana grew up with a lot of privilege and even more social pressures. As the second born, most of the attention went to her older brother, the heir, which granted Oriana more freedom, but at the cost of being largely ignored by her family. Unless, of course, Oriana failed to meet the bare minimum of the high expectations that all members of nobility are held to. Such a failure would bring much shame to Oriana and her family, and as such was a fate she worked endlessly to avoid. She poured herself into her studies and honed her magic in order to make her family proud and earn their approval, but it was never enough. She still kept at it, hoping that one day she would be able to get that notable achievement that would earn her family's attention. When not studying magic, she would spend a lot of time holed up in the family library studying history, which she found immensely interesting, no matter how many times she reread the same books. When a summer solstice celebration gets violently disrupted by an extremist group of cultists, Oriana is granted a great power by a strange flaming bird. In the aftermath, Oriana thinks that she finally has the key to proving her worth to her family. However, she finds she doesn't actually know how to control her borrowed power, and none of the history books in her library has any mention of the strange creature. When the bird urges Oriana to leave her home and seek out answers, she does, and sets out to learn more about the flaming bird and the mysterious extremist group that now has their sights on her, wanting her power for themselves. Ori's design has probably changed the most out of all the main characters since my first video of them. The most notable change was making her fat, which I did show off in my 10 styles video, but even since then I've been trying to refine the specific shape of her to be more authentic to what the kind of body a trans woman might have. In general, I want to lean away from the idea that trans women have to perfectly align with traditional women's beauty standards to be seen as valid or deserving of respect. So that is something Ori herself would believe to an extent, and gradually break out of as part of her character arc. Also, trying to make her outfit convey her wealthy upbringing without having so much detail that's a pain to draw over and over, but also be fitting for more summery weather. I changed her bow to a bundle of feathers as a visual allusion to the magic bird that gave her a power boost. I drew some expressions on the side to both show Ori's personality in how she expresses herself, but also to show off a couple more details, like her teeth. I've decided that elves in this world have fang-like teeth, because I just love characters with pointy teeth. Nestor Patina grew up on a ranch in the countryside with his 2 loving parents and a number of extended family. His father had come from the city looking for a more quiet life, and his mother was a country native and a skilled cowherd. It was a modest living, but Nestor was never without something to do. He loved his father's gentle kindness and quippy sense of humor, but he thought his mother was the coolest person to ever exist. She taught Nestor how to shoot a gun when he was 9 years old, after thoroughly drilling gun safety into his head. She then later gave him his own pistol for his 11th birthday. Only a few months later, Nestor's parents are both killed trying to defend their injured ranch hand from an assailant with eyes that glowed a bright red from behind a raven skull mask. Afterwards, Nestor moved to the city to live with his paternal aunt Minerva. Minerva was never good with dealing with children, but she loved Nestor and did her best to raise him even when she had no idea how. She took Nestor on as a tinker's apprentice, and he fell in love with tinkering and building gadgets. But even as he settled into his new city life with his aunt and making friends at school, he was still regularly plagued with nightmares and anxiety. When he couldn't sleep, which is often, he'd spend time tinkering, and during the day, he'd practice his shooting. Eventually, shortly after reaching adulthood, he left to travel the country, hunting bounties and doing other odd jobs, all while looking for more information he can about the person who killed his parents. He doesn't know what he'll do if he ever finds them, and the thought of ever seeing them again is terrifying. But Nestor is just so tired of being scared of everything all the time. Maybe if he can prove he's capable of challenging the source of his fear, it will finally go away and he could live in peace. Nestor is one of my favorites to draw, largely because I just have a lot of my favorite character design elements in him. Animal ears, fluffy hair, freckles. This character is just pure self-indulgence for me. But I have made some changes since my last video featuring him, namely making his face a little less round and giving him a bit of facial hair and eye bags to show his poor sleeping habits. Adding these little quirks makes him look a bit older, and yet also makes him look more cute because it feels more authentic and not just like he is tailor-made to be seen as cute, if that makes any sense. Another notable change was giving him Klinefelter syndrome, because it just felt right. I wanted him to be struggling to grow a beard to look more like his father, as he already looks so much like his mother, but not having too much luck. But I then later added lore that fawns are pretty hairy, and even female fawns tend to have some facial hair. So giving Nestor Klinefelter syndrome seemed like a good way to have my cake and eat it too. And as a bonus, I get to include some intersex representation. I tried to represent that in his body type, but I kept it fairly subtle because I still want him to be a beanpole. Nestor's a very expressive person, and basically any strong emotion, positive or negative, is likely to bring him to tears. Raymon's mother died before they were old enough to remember her, leaving their father Everett to raise a small child on his own. It was hard, but he adored his child, and was willing to put in as much work as it took to make sure they were cared for. As a result, the two of them were always very close. As a Titan, which is what I'm renaming the fantasy race both Raymon and Everett belong to, by the way, Everett was naturally much stronger than humans, and thus was able to get work doing manual labor for good pay, while getting plenty of time to spot despite of his kid. However, when Raymon was about 10 years old, Everett was injured in a workplace accident and ended up losing a leg. After that, getting work wasn't so easy. Everett was still able to find some work, but he wasn't able to use his Titan strength to do those in-demand jobs anymore, so he had to work many more hours for far less pay. Raymon became very used to coming home from school to an empty home and making dinner while waiting for her dad to get off work. And after an altercation at school ended with Raymon breaking another kid's nose, they became very used to the other kids being scared of them and being alone there too. At least, until they met Nestor, shortly after he moved in with his aunt, and the two of them became fast friends. When Raymon was about 15, Everett remarried, and Raymon gave a new stepfather and 3 siblings. They were apprehensive at first, but soon found they enjoyed having younger siblings, and fell in love with their blended family. When Nestor decided to leave in search of answers, Raymon followed, wanting Nestor to have someone to watch his back. Raymon wants nothing more than to help shoulder the burdens of others. She doesn't need help carrying her own. She is used to dealing with her own small problems by herself. Raymon's body type has remained largely the same, any difference being me more just getting used to drawing larger, more muscular characters. I did make some changes to their clothing though, mostly due to some lore changes. My Titans have always been inspired by Goliaths and Earth Genasi from D&D, so I borrowed a bit from that and decided that they mostly came from colder, mountainous environments, which means that they can handle cold well, but maybe don't do so well in hot weather. And since the climate of the main country of the story takes place in is loosely inspired by the American Midwest, and the story will be starting in summer, I figured Raymon would benefit from some cooler clothing. Plus, I love it when casts have characters with varying degrees of modesty in their clothing. Like, yeah, if every feminine character wears super revealing clothing, that's kinda telling on how the creator views women. But I don't think every person assigned female at birth, or who is female presenting, needs to always dress in super modest clothing. I also did change Raymon's vitiligo to resemble vitiligo more accurately. Still very stylized for the sake of ease of drawing, but hopefully now more recognizable as vitiligo. On a similar note, I also tweaked Raymon's skin tone slightly. It's supposed to vaguely resemble stone, so to further emphasize that, I pushed the color away from the natural warmer tones of human skin and into cooler tones. Frost grew up on the streets of a city with a severe class divide, where those with magical power were treated like royalty, and those without were seen as lesser. Magic was, in theory, something that anyone could learn with enough study and practice, but the teaching of it was largely restricted to the upper class, lest they upset the established power dynamic. But Frost was never one to let others tell him what he could and couldn't do, nor his friends in the small gang of street urchins who all looked after one another. Frost and his friends would sneak into the wealthier areas of town in order to watch magical academies teaching kids magic, and then at night, in the safety of the back alleys they called home, they'd copy what they saw. Without the proper training or guidance, they'd skipped over the basics and jumped to the more flashy advanced magic. After a lot of time and frustration, they were finally successful. It was a lot less refined or controlled than someone properly trained, but it was magic. They were able to cast magic. A group of preteen nobody orphans living on the street. Needless to say, they were ecstatic. They'd use their powers to fuck around as children without guardians to tell them no or what to do. Frost in particular loved exploring places, often places that he probably shouldn't be, but that hint of danger just made it more exciting. One time when the urchins were exploring such a place, things went very awry. When Frost became trapped and unable to escape, fuck's sake. When Frost became trapped and unable to escape with an impending danger approaching, the other oldest of the urchins had to choose between staying to help him or getting the younger urchins to safety. Ultimately, they decided to prioritize the younger urchins and left Frost behind. After that betrayal, Frost later ended up getting taken in by another group, one who promised him the opportunity to tear down the corrupt establishment and build a new, better society. I don't think Frost's design has changed super drastically in these past few months, but maybe my perception of that is skewed by just how much Frost has changed over the years he's existed in my brain. The biggest change recently, aside from changing some colors, was making his outfit a smidge more gender non-conforming. Admittedly, the main reason for this is because I once drew these characters in some of my own outfits, and because I dress pretty femininely, that meant putting my boys in more feminine outfits. And since then, I've just had so much fun drawing Frost in skirts. It's in character for him to not give a shit about gender norms anyway. The fastest way to get him to do something is to tell him he can't. I've also changed his body type a bit, making him a tad more muscular to give him a more athletic build. He's not like shredded or anything, but I did draw a reference from gymnasts to get that sense of agile athleticism. Other than that, I just simplified some details to make him a bit easier to draw consistently. His face has always been the trickiest for me, so every little bit helps. I do hope you enjoyed listening to me ramble about my babies again. I just love them so much. The comic for them is still in development, but it might take longer than I originally projected in my first published video. Go figure. But in the meantime, I am working on a short story focused on how Nestor and Raymon met, just as a smaller project to get my feet wet before delving into the bigger project that is Undying Bonds. I've also got some other drawing challenges lined up, and obviously Artfight as well. That will be linked in the description below if you're interested in drawing one of these characters. Any art of them always brings me so much joy. But until next time, goodbye!